Hello there guys and welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week is part 2 of my chat with Tom Everatt, actor, presenter and all-round great conversationalist. So if you didn't tune in last week, go back and check out part 1 where we spoke about acting as well as Norse mythology, deity, religion and all kinds of other cool stuff as well, so make sure you check that out. But for this part, we actually tackle things that are more theoretical and philosophical. We talk about free will and determinism, political discourse and idealism, tribalism, how this isolation of lockdowns affected our ability to communicate, negativity, the news cycle, being a good person, and lots of other stuff like that. So if all of those things pique your interest, make sure you stay tuned because, well, there's not going to be a promo today, so straight after the little jingle, the Genuine Chit-Chat theme music, you're going to get the remainder of the conversation between myself and Tom, and then I'll be back right at the very end to give you guys more information on what's to come, future guests, my other shows, guest spots, all those sorts of other things as well. And just for clarity, all supporters on Patreon actually got access to part 2 of this episode 1 week early, because any supporters on Patreon get access to whenever I split episodes, they get access to the full unsplit episode when part 1 drops. So if you want to check that out, I'll give you more information on that right at the very end. But without further ado, here is Tom Everatt. Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton.
But a lot of the time, the amount of times it would be, had parents in the military and were, you think, oh, maybe we've got quite authoritative parents, let's say, or they moved school a lot because they were moving in different, places or whatever, and the amount of times it comes up and you think, there's something in that's, it's definitely there. It's a very interesting theory. And I actually think there is a lot of truth in for actors. We're all tortured souls, really.
Yeah, it is. With free will and determinism, it is a very interesting thing because I've heard Sam Harris, he's a person who I've listened to quite a lot talk about free will and determinism and that sort of thing. And it's one of those things where, like, we kind of need to think we're in control of everything we're doing, because if we don't feel like we're in control, then we kind of lose the will, essentially. It's one of those things where we have to, even if there's something behind the scenes that's, be it the subconscious, be it a deity, be it whatever, we have to think that we're the ones doing it, because otherwise it doesn't work. And with determinism, it's that idea that, like, if you had a powerful enough computer and you managed to obtain all data, just somehow magically all data, you would be able to predict a human by exactly what they're doing. If you consumed enough of the data and said, okay, well, with this amount of people who have, parents who divorce by this age and then move at this time, it means that they will develop this personality, sort of part of them by this age. And then if they develop that part and then they don't make a friend in the first 2 weeks of school, that becomes a bad thing rather than a good thing. And there is a way, I think, that from what I've heard, I would imagine that if you got enough data on that and you combined it, you could predict people, because there are so many people where you see them and it's just like, no people necessarily that you look at from a distance, but when you do a true deep dive into serial killers, or like I did psychology at college. I'm not a psychology expert by any means, but like I was interested by serial killers and stuff, and that sort of the idea of the human mind, and like to really look inward, you do have to kind of see your own flaws in a lot of ways. And to what you were saying with determinism, I'm now just thinking about it where, like, I can be a show-offy dick sometimes. That's one of my character flaws, is being overconfident and being too overly dominant with my voice in the room. And what happened with that is that when I was younger, in primary school and secondary school, I was bullied. It wasn't like hospitalized or horrendous, came home with bloody and beaten. It was just like everyone hated me, and apart from like 3 people, and I was a dick, to be fair. But it was like I was a know-it-all. And the thing is that when I started making self-deprecating jokes about stuff, then people wouldn't be able to make fun of me in an attacking, bullying way. They would just kind of laugh with me, almost
you got
emotionally
there first
self-harming.
as well, so it's like yeah.
And it's not me funnier as well, because I could think of generally speaking, I was a very fat kid as well. So, fun nickname that my friends, one of them still has in their phone, this is how far back it goes, is Booby Boy Burton, because my surname is Burton. So, yeah,
I'm
that's
not
a fun
laughing
one.
at that, that's not funny.
You are laughing at that. It's fine. Everyone should know. I literally said that on a podcast once, and I can't remember who it was, but someone else listened to the podcast, and now every time they say something to me, they're always like, I don't want to call you Baby Boy Burton, but I just want you to know that I laughed about it the other day because I remembered. It's like, that's fine. I wouldn't say it on the podcast if it wasn't fine with people. It was one of my closest friends. I think it might be my friend Reese, who's the first ever person on this podcast and was the person on like number 100. So he's one of my closest friends in the whole world. And I think he called me it. So it's one of those things. But like with everyone else there in the school, who weren't friends with me and stuff, it was that sort of, I can think of something funnier than the majority of people who are actual bullies. Someone's like being horrible and harsh and mean. Most of the time, from my experience, they're not that intelligent. Not to be horrible, but it's just like, so if you're getting bullied and you already know the insults they're going to throw at you, you can normally think of stuff that's probably funnier than what they're going to say, quicker than they're going to say it. And if you say it, it also is funnier than someone kind of being a dick. So I became that for a while. And then when I went into college, I still had that. And it worked when I had parties and things in some ways, but I would also be very jarring to people. And I would come across like an egotistical dick because I had that sort of defense mechanism, which was like, I'm going to get there first. I'm going to be the loudest. I'm going to make you laugh. And I'm going to be really self-deprecating and everything's going to be fine. It's like that one type of personality doesn't work all the time. No. It just doesn't. And when it's not checked and things, it can manifest into slightly more unfavorable traits and things, which is what happened to me. It was just like, I was just a dick for a while. I wasn't horrible to be around. I still had friends, but everyone has these sort of moments, but just I was quite egotistical for a while. And so I think that with that aspect, it is probably now thinking about it of like, that came from in part because I had to do that in school. Otherwise I'd have been the butt of the joke. And then, you know, me and Reese, from Reese I mentioned, we're very similar in many ways. Our minds work very similarly. But he is a complete introvert and I'm a complete extrovert. Yeah. And it's one of those things where I like looking at the differences in our lives and the similarities in our lives, try and connect the dots.
How people have moved away from it in different... Yeah. I think with... what was I going to say? Oh, no, yeah.
You've done it. You've done it. Yeah. Hooray. I've got it. Well, I was talking about free will and determinism. That was the sort of core elements in talking about, you know, human condition and sort of self-evaluating why one does a certain thing.
Yeah, I guess to sort of bring it back to a kind of a theatrical idea is that it goes back to Aristotle. So, you know, ancient Greece. And he would say that... do you know what? I'm not going to remember exactly what it is, but you know, basically, our character is essentially what other people perceive us to be. So, when you were younger, and you thought, you know, you were being maybe perhaps very clever by coming in loud, being the loudest in the room, and having the first answer. That to you was, you know, being, you know, the most intelligent person in the room, let's say, and then the other
that was the mindset.
Yeah, but then the other 29 people in the room might have thought, "What a dick! We don't like him," and then that leads them onto their leads to them deciding to bully because we all want to take down someone that's bigger than us, don't we? Unfortunately, but that's the way we are. And then, but you know, that sort of leads to you changing your character, but then it's not really your character. You're then essentially you are playing a different part. You're not really being yourself. You're being a version of yourself that is more appeasing to other people. We kind of all do act all the time. You know, the way that you speak to your grandparents or your boss, actually even that isn't going to be the same thing. The way you speak to your grandparent isn't going to be the same as you speak to your boss. You treat both with respect, hopefully, but you treat both with respect, but you wouldn't necessarily treat them with the same kind of kindness or even there's so many different things, different factors that would come into play. So I guess we do act differently all the time, and why we do those things all do link back to those childhood memories that we can't quite put our finger on. I think it's a fascinating thing. I only really came about it when I was at drama school. Determinism and free will. It was a podcast, Radio 4, BBC Radio 4, In Our Time, which is
yes, I've listened to a few of them.
Yeah, wonderful podcast.
I listened to the one about the circadian rhythm, I think it was the one. Like, I listened to one, I was like, I need to listen to more of that, and then it disappeared into the abyss.
Yeah, I keep meaning to go back. I used to listen to a lot, and now I kind of have stopped for years, but they're always on my podcast list. But I don't tend to listen to podcasts as much as I used to, unfortunately. But I will soon. I'm going to get back into it. I've got a plan. But yeah, there's one on free will, which is quite an old one. I think it's maybe 2016. It's back from. It's not that old, but from when they started doing them. There's hundreds on there now. But that was from East 15, and it was something a really interestingly new look at life, and I think it meant a lot finding that as an actor, because it was okay. So all the characters you're very rarely people. Well, no, maybe we do really. Sometimes people just do things, but it is really, when you break it down, very, very rare. Like apart from a knee-jerk reaction, literally, it's very even if someone just is looking at a cup on a table and just knocks it off, they'll probably laugh to themselves because it made them laugh. It was quite funny. They were trying to be obnoxious or be a dick or just make other people in the room laugh, whatever it might be. But it comes from somewhere. It must come from somewhere. And finding that out and going down that journey can be a rabbit hole, because it's one of the great things they say on that podcast is that it's provably unprovable. You cannot prove determinism, because the only way to prove it would essentially be, okay, so why one of their examples was going for dinner, and you have 3 options on the menu. There's chicken, fish, and vegetables, and you pick chicken because it was a free choice. That's free will. I just fancied chicken today. Why did you fancy chicken today? Well, I've not really eaten much today, and I did a workout earlier, and I fancied some more protein, and I had fish last night as well, so I kind of fancied to have chicken. Okay, so it wasn't a free choice, was it? Because of those things that happened before. So then you start going back. So why did you have fish last night? Oh, well, because of this. And then I watched Seaspiracy. Thought it'd be funny. But you start going back. Why did you have this? Or I had it also that chicken. My mum used to make that recipe, and it was my favourite when I was growing up. Oh, okay, good. Why did she make it? And you start going back. And the only way to get to the decision you just made is you'd have to go back through every decision that's ever been made throughout the history of time, to all the way back to the Big Bang, or whenever you believe time began. But the Big Bang, from every single event that's happened throughout the history of time, has led to this one moment. Do you want to pick chicken, vegetables, or fish? And you pick chicken. And without proving every other decision that was made before you leading to that, you can't prove that was why you did it. But we know it's there. But that's why it's one of those. Provably unproven. You could never prove that. You could try, but you'd die pretty soon before you got halfway.
It is one of those things. There's a lot of sort of intriguing thought experiments, because the free will determinism is one of those things where it's like you can use it as a tool to assist in introspection and self looking at yourself and trying to improve yourself. That's not the only way, but that is one of the many ways one could. But it's also like, one example I like to throw around is it's a slightly different, but it's the biggest theory that it doesn't matter if it's true or not, it makes no difference, which is simulation theory. It's the the idea that we're all a simulation, because in brief the idea is that at some point in the future we're going to have the technology to be able to create virtual reality that is indistinguishable from real life. Now, when that happens, there are going to be millions, if not billions, of computers running simulations up to the point, sort of, when we get the perfect simulation. There's not going to be, turned over the next day, we'll try for simulations, we'll make one, it's perfect, we're done. That won't happen. There'll be millions upon billions of variations and things, and then once a perfect simulation can be created, then billions can be created. And then the idea is that, what are the statistical chances that your reality is the only reality that is the real one, and not the one of the however many trillion simulations? So by that logic, statistically speaking, we're probably in a simulation. But whether or not we are doesn't make any difference to any aspect of our life. I'm an agnostic believer in simulation theory. I don't actually necessarily, in my heart of hearts, believe we are. But if we were, and I found out with explicit evidence, I'd be like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it either or doesn't make a difference to me. And I think free will determinism, in some aspects with psychology and things, it's such an interesting experiment, and you could do a deep dive on it. But also for some people, they'll just go, Yeah, well, either I can make my decisions or I can't, but even if I can't, but I think I can, is that not the same? It's like, well, no, but it's fine.
Yeah, there is such a simplicity to things sometimes, and sometimes we, certain people probably potentially like, you and I overthink things or start looking into these things, and actually, it's like in the Matrix, ignorance is bliss. Yeah, sometimes. It really is. It really is so much simpler just to go, okay, whatever. I remember doing a show. We were creating a show, I think just after or during drama school, I can't remember. But it was, it was a big argument about, how people are going through their lives. A bit of, oh God, it's so wanky. But it was a bit of like a thing of, very, probably even GCSE drama, but, people are like going through lives, just, enjoying material things, putting on their makeup and looking at the phone and not experiencing life. We'd had this kind of transformative year and we kind of wanted to show that. There's no real way of showing it without being arrogant. But we tried. But then I did have the point that, and I'm glad to say I wasn't the arrogant one. But for some people, they're really happy. And, there's so many issues in terms of, social media, phones, even, capitalism, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many things that aren't right and perfect, but, we're not in any position to be I don't even know what the word is, to be the person to, dictate on how it should be. I don't know, just as much as anybody else does, really. No one knows really, do they? Even the experts don't really know.
Or they know like one piece of the puzzle, of the 1,000-piece puzzle. It's like, I know how to get this puzzle solved. How? Well, I know what that piece means. It's like, well, there's another 999 pieces.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so we had this, transformative year. We wanted to show it and say, like, get outside, get in touch with nature, because, we're all connected and this kind of almost like spiritual thing and how... But then it was like, well, yeah, but hold on, we need to be careful because we can't start telling people what to do because we've had this great year that we know better. Then it just is this exactly the same as everybody else. I think Alan Watts, but it's not his saying. I think it might even be from, I don't know who said it. But the route to hell is paved with good intentions. It's quite strange. Over the last few months, I've sort of, I've not changed my politics. I am liberal. But I've been having lots of very long, deep conversations with people that are, some that are right wing, which I don't agree with, but I have been. I basically my actor side job has been being in construction and being a labourer for the last since September, so for 7, 8, 9 months, and honestly, it's been fascinating. And some of the people I've met are so interesting, so intelligent. And so varied to, you grow up in a world of, not grow up, but you spend all your time being in the liberal arts, and then you spend the next 9 months in quite often a more right wing or right sided, dominantly sided environment. You learn a lot, and you learn a lot from the people who aren't all monsters. They're not all horrible, nasty people. They just have a different politics to yourself. A few of them being sort of libertarians and being quite fascinating people. I can't remember what the point was. What was I going to say? This sort of thought and theory from speaking to so many people from different walks of life, and sometimes there is I'm sort of looking at maybe a few years ago I would have even said I was a bit of a socialist, and then I was a bit of a Corbynite, and that's sort of I still like a lot of those things in theory, but sometimes I'm starting to see the reason why sometimes almost the feeling with some of the left is that if you're not doing everything perfectly, then you are wrong. There is a certain
idealism. Yeah,
idealism, and until everybody's perfect, everybody's in the wrong. And even if you've not done anything wrong, you're still in the wrong because you are this, you're that. Almost sometimes so quick to label people And yeah, it's been a very interesting change in the last few months. Not because I would still count myself as liberal. I do like the idea of libertarianism and believing for people's liberties and for rights, and that above anything else, that above any politics is really just about people's rights. But I still think I'm more liberal than libertarian. But that does actually sound very very nice and appealing. But there is a bit of a worry that sometimes we're getting worryingly far. I don't know in terms of. I don't really know what this tangent is that I'm going down, but I think on the spot here a little bit when I'm talking to you, Mike. You got me going whilst you're on the podcast.
I totally get what you're saying, because I've been finding that myself as well. I'm very much like, politically speaking, I am on the left for the majority of issues. There's a few not so much, but it is like you say, with some of the attitudes of the left now primarily are all or nothing. And although I agree with the policies of the left, I don't agree with a lot of the attitudes of the left. Whereas with the right, they generally have a more accepting attitude in certain respects, but not in others. And it's really jarring, because when the majority of people, I think, are generally in the middle. Because I think what you were saying with the road to evil is laid with good intentions. It's like, generally speaking, apart from absolute complete psychopaths, most people who do bad things are doing it because they believe what they're doing is correct. Like, I'm not a Hitler apologist in any way, shape or form, but he committed mass genocide, which is the most horrible atrocities of the planet have happened. One of the most horrendous atrocities of the planet is committing mass genocide, the Holocaust. But he was doing that thinking it was a good thing. Now, obviously, it was the most horrible things ever, but he didn't view it that way. And it's similar in certain other aspects. That's an extreme example I like to give to people, because it's quite clear and easy to sort of see. But when you get it in the backseat of politics, like I was like you, I was very much on the left, and I was a Corbynite and really into that. And then, the last few years, I'm just like, there's like maybe 5 or maybe even 10% of politics that are more on the right than on the left that I agree with about small things. It's not like, gay marriage or anything like that. That obviously left issue for that. And I'm very left with some other ideas, but it is just the extremes. It's almost like the goalposts keep getting moved. Yeah. And if you don't move with the goalpost, then you're no longer part of that team. And it's like, I'm not part of any team when it comes to politics. I just generally believe more on the left than the right, but people are so tribal about it.
It's becoming, it's like, actually tribal. It's like people are football fans now, or like, but in terms of politics, probably most of them hate football, but it's becoming, it's so blind almost. It's like blind faith sometimes. It's becoming like blind faith, which is, link back to earlier, but, where people are becoming so could be left or right, that they can't see the wood for the trees. Sometimes they can't see if their side is in a football match, let's say Man United and Chelsea, and Man United give away a penalty, and the Man United fans cannot see for the life of them that he was in the wrong. The Man United player was in the wrong. No, it's because blue and red. I didn't even mean that. But it was the guy in the blue. The guy in the blue did this. The guy in the blue did that. How dare the guy in the blue did that? There's no point actually look to themselves and go, yeah, okay, our guy fucked up. And it's someone put it to me like it's almost a bit like things in England are becoming a bit like American politics, where it's, this is my way. I don't care what my way is, but this is my way. If you don't like my way, I hate you. And it's becoming so simple, but it's becoming so opposite, so polarized, so quickly as well in the last few years. And I almost feel a bit hypocritical, because I thought, back in 2016, post Brexit, thinking, do you know what, maybe we've fucked up here, being a Remainer, that people have been so soft and liberal for so long. We need to get more aggressive. We need to actually stand up for this more, because it's sort of like, pre-2016, it felt like if you were liberal, it was like, oh, it's okay, you can do what you want, don't worry, it's fine. And actually we need to stand up for ourselves. We need to, shout for what we want. And now it's worryingly could get out of hand. And I think one of the things, sort of thinking back to this road to hell paved with good intentions, is the road to hell is paved with good intentions, is sometimes those people who mean well the people are after. I'm not saying any of these things are bad things, obviously, but people that are very aggressive in terms of equal rights, equal pay, veganism, or whatever it may be, can sometimes, they mean well, but of course they mean well, and they are doing I believe are to be the right things, but can do it in a way that isn't gonna necessarily work, and it could then dictate or put down and shout down other people. They're then gonna ruin things for them, which again is hard because it's such a juxtaposition, or like a contradiction maybe, that I'm saying it, because I believe in these values. I'm not a vegan or anything. I'm not a vegan, I eat meat, but I believe in these values, but I don't know. I don't even know, because I think that's also something that's very unfairly shouted at the left, normally by a more sort of right-leaning press, is that, I agree in principle that they took the statue down. I agree with their right to protest, but I don't agree that they took the statue down because that is history. And all this sort of, actually, no, fuck him. Actually, fuck him. Do you know what? The guy was a slaver. Fuck the guy. He should have had his statue down. How the hell it was still up, I don't know. Why things are named. Fair fucking play. Fair play they took the statue down, is my opinion. So they should have. But then it's it comes to protests in London, wherever else. The environmental group is mostly younger people. I can't remember the name. Extinction Rebellion. Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. Well, I absolutely. I agree with climate change. I'm not for it. I agree with climate change. I agree it's a thing and we need to stop it. But one of them was on top of my tube the other day, sat on top of the DLR, and it wouldn't leave, and I was late for work, and I don't agree with that. So I don't agree with. But now all of a sudden they don't agree. You think, oh God, this almost like there's no winning, and it's such a sham, really, because it's such an easy way for, I think, right. I always feel like I'm doing it, but it's not half this conversation. But such an easy way for right-leaning tabloids and press to get away with doing nothing, really, is by saying, we were going to do something until he sat on top of that tube, and now we're not going to do anything because he's ruined it for everyone. And you think, oh God, this is insane, because we're not going to get anywhere. But hey, divide and conquer I really think is the order of our time, a little bit, sadly. I think we're so easy to divide now, and maybe part of that comes down to the left, because there is a label for everything now. You're not just, obviously a big one would be male or female. Well, of course, now you could be hermaphrodite, transgender, gender fluid, genderqueer, which actually is a line from a monologue, one-man show essentially that I did recently about a man who falls in love with someone whose gender isn't clear. It's on YouTube. You can watch it, and I am that guy who falls in love with someone. So I'm not against these things. That is a line from it. It's very good, very good. Got 5 stars. Just saying.
I'll make sure I include a link to it.
Yeah. We'll put a link on. I got distracted with my own success there. What was I talking about?
Classic actor. You talk about the sort of the left and the right, and you're saying a lot of things.
There's so many labels that almost it was good for a time to have all these different labels, because it gave people identity. But now that there are so many different labels, that if you're not specifically the labels that I am, then we won't get on. Then even like you and I, Mike, we're from the same part. We're the same part of Hampshire, pretty much. We're from, in terms of the whole world, that's a pretty close place to be from, a few miles away. We're the same, pretty much from the sounds of it, same political sort of ideas. And it might be one little thing that we disagree on, but if that's a different label, that's it now. We can't be friends. And that almost feels like this is where so many labels are coming into everything. I don't even know how many labels, there are in politics now. It seems to be so many. And perhaps this will cause, I think a few years ago, it kind of caused a great, they called it youthquake, with this great sort of explosion of the youth being involved in politics. Because I remember growing up, I didn't care. It was all the same.
No, I didn't care at all.
It was all the same.
Even college.
For context, I'm 31. I'm
27, so we're very close age as well.
Yeah, and I didn't care. It was always the same. Same thing happened. No one was ever going to influence it. It's always the same thing. Whereas now there is a chance to do that. But again, maybe we're potentially going to go so far that we are just going to breed a bunch of nihilists and they don't believe anything, because it's so hard to believe in something, because unless you believe in specifically the right things as somebody else, and there's a Facebook page for that, not that any young person uses Facebook, but if you it's just for us old people, then there's no point believing in anything. I don't know. That was a rant.
It's one of those things where I've got myself into many sort of mind loops of politics, because it's one of those things where there's no clear solution, because it just seems what's almost happened is you've got these two plants that have almost like wavy branches, and they were next to each other for a while, and they were just slowly growing together.
Yeah.
And then they got to a certain point, and they've entangled to such a degree, you can't untangle the plants anymore without killing one of them. And the problem is that both plants need to be sustained to protect, say, the ground beneath it. So if you destroy one, everything goes. But if you keep leaving it, it's just going to get worse and tighter until it like destroys itself. And it's just this thing where it's almost like watching a car crash in slow motion. And you're at the distance away of it that you, even if you sprinted full speed, there's nothing you could do to save it. And I think our generation is the kind of generation where obviously we had lives before the internet, but then the internet was a big thing in our sort of teen years and our sort of coming of age years. And then we've also got, we've got Brexit, and we lived through, over the year 2000, and we've got all these new bits of information all coming in from every angle all at once and things, and we're trying to process it all. And it's just seemingly an impossible task, because you're watching like these political things and you think, well, okay, so this person on the right thinks all these things and this person on the left thinks all these things, but they agree on these 3 points, but neither of them will budge an inch to agree on that thing to help anyone else. It is that sort of all or nothing mentality. And I think what's happening is, I think social media probably doesn't help these matters. I don't think social media is a net good or net bad thing. It can be good or bad.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it amplifies everything, and it amplifies the good and the bad. And I think what's happened is more and more people who are generally in the centre of politics, who don't really care, are kind of being forced to, in some way, align themselves.
Choose, yeah.
Because it is that sort of thing where, I always have to preface, I'm generally left-leaning. But I feel like I kind of have to do that, because if people think I'm right-leaning, then that will be problematic. Even though I don't find people on the right problematic to some degree. I know there's plenty of people, like you were saying you spoke with at the construction side of things. Some of the most politically intelligent people that I've ever met were right-leaning.
Yeah.
Not like, they weren't, not the sort of, not anti-gay marriage or anything like that, but more so sort of, it's the perception of how to take care of people. That's the general idea. The left is like, more benefits and welfare this is really broad strokes here, but left is generally more benefits, help people when they haven't had a good start in life, try and give everyone an even playing field, and then they'll flourish from there. But it's a long-term thing. You need to invest a lot now, pay off in the future. Whereas generally the right is more so, no, people need to, if you give them too much, they'll become marshmallows. You need to make them work, and then they'll have the sort of bootstrap mentality and pull themselves up. And the problem is that both of them have anecdotes which are correct. You have like a single mum who's got loads of immune disorders and diseases who, without the NHS, couldn't afford to live and would be homeless. But you also do have people taking advantage of the welfare system. But then you also have got like people who grew up with nothing and were self-made people and made themselves millionaires or whatever. But you've also got trust fund people who waste everyone's time, have car crashes and do all kinds of horrible things and get away with it because they have no idea of consequence. And the problem is neither side is willing to look at the other one and go, I get where you're coming from on that part, and I get where you're coming from on that part. Let's try and come together and compromise. They're both like, as you say, there's one slither of disagreement, and the whole house of cards is off the table.
And maybe do you reckon as well that's probably getting worse over the last year, because we've spent time without people, not being with people, and only interacting through essentially. Through social media, again, I agree with you. It's not necessarily net good, net bad, but we only contact. So when it's in writing, it's like, you kind of grew up thinking, well, if it's in writing, it's definite. And sometimes you might write something and it's not quite. Also, the problem with writing something, and this is one of the great things about acting. but it's also one of the terrible things about normal life, is that when something's written down, a text, great as an actor, you can interpret in 100 different ways. Same thing happens as a real person, you can interpret in 100 different ways. And that could be, the most argumentative text in the world. It could be something said with sincerity, or, something quite earnest, and or whatever, whatever the message might be. And I think, maybe it has just got so much worse over the last year, because it's so easy to find faults because people are just connecting sporadically. I think also, I always find that at the moment it's so easy to argue with people, because let's say, just trying to think of a good example, but there would be, I'm going to think of a football analogy because it's just going to be easier. But let's say Tottenham aren't very happy with their manager, Jose Mourinho, at the moment. And it would be like, say he does something good, and there'll be all his fans coming up for him saying, oh, it's great, it's great, it's great, it's great. And then as an outsider, you look at them, this is exactly the same. I don't know why I could have just said this in terms of like, the Conservative Party and Boris. He does something, I don't know why I couldn't have done that. I'll do that. The Conservative Party and Boris does something good. Lots of people come out and say, oh, he's brilliant, he's done this, he's done that, he's done this, he's brilliant, what a great guy. And then 6 weeks later, it does a U-turn, and it's, oh, he's awful, always said he's awful. And then the people that are on the outside looking in go, oh, yeah, but you all loved him a minute ago. All you lot saying that you hate him, you actually loved him 6 weeks ago. They didn't. It was just his other fans. It was his fans. And now the ones that didn't like him. But then we kind of assume that because we've seen it on social media, someone said he's great, that's everyone from the Conservative Party said he's great. And then someone said, I always fucking said he was shit. Everyone from the Conservative Party now hates it. And it's like, well, everyone, again, is getting labelled because one person has said something. So the entire Conservative, supporters are being labelled as Boris haters or Boris lovers. And it's all up and down and up and down. It's just so quick and easy to split people up. And even people within the that party that support him are thinking, oh, I don't know, what, did we like him? I always did like him. I don't know. Question yourselves. I think I don't know. I've got friends who do have this idea of like a sort of media propaganda of split and divide. And I get it. I do really get it that there is potentially I would argue that there's not very many things that as human beings we want in life. We want a few things. We want happiness. We want to, essentially we want to be safe, warm, content, happy. We want peace. There's not really, even, the top generals in the, armies around the world don't want war. They want peace. No. They probably want to be in power maybe after the war. But, essentially they want peace after the war. People want peace. They don't want to fight. They want to get on. They want to, have a good life and be happy. That's all we all want, really. But yet it's very hard to control a population of 7 billion people that all want the same thing. And it feels like sometimes over this pandemic, we all started to realize that actually we're all not that different, and we are the same. And actually there is a community here, and I do have neighbours, and we all getting along, and we all do get along, and we are all human beings at the end of the day. And it is that simple. It's not he, she, hermaphrodite, gender fluid. We are human beings. We're not have to be straight, gay, bisexual. We don't have to be black, white, mixed ethnicity or whatever it's going to be. We are just human beings all pushing together to get through this thing. And that almost felt like how it was about a year ago.
At the start,
didn't it? At the start, it felt like, we get this now. And then a year later, any chance there is to try and split people up and get people arguing again, and we're here and we're fighting again about the most mundane, inconsequential things. Consequences don't matter.
It is bizarre. I noticed that thing as well. Like a year ago, I was like, "Oh, cool." You always hear those things. There's films that talk about it, Independence Day, Watchmen, all kinds of things where they go, you need one world-ending event to bring people together, and that's cool. When you had 9/11, that was horrendous. Everyone who lived in it was New York 9/11. Just to was it? Yeah. I want to clarify before I offend loads of people and choose the wrong city. But yeah, in New York, a lot of people I know who said basically for several years, everyone in New York was so nice to each other, and there was just less aggression, less road rage, because they all felt like they were together against, the terrorists essentially. And then obviously slowly that fizzles away, and then everyone's generally a dick again. And I found with COVID at the start, I was saying like, oh, this does suck, and obviously loads of people are dying, and that's horrendous. But silver lining, people are seemingly getting better.
Yeah,
and that was actually the first 3 months maybe, but at the year mark now, people are now just irritable beyond belief, and they seem to want to it's almost like an animal that's really hungry, and so you put your hand in the cage with a treat to try and give it food, and it bites you on the wrist, and you're like, okay, and then you just move away, and it gets worse as you're looking at it. You're like, I want to help, but you are the thing that's stopping you from actually getting better. And I think with a lot of the time, it's some people will go out on social media or in life, and they will focus on all the negative, and I find that I am a realist. This is how I got my girlfriend, funnily enough. It was on my Tinder profile, which is, she always brings it up. So I'm a pessimistic optimist, therefore I'm a realist. So as always, I hope for the best in people, but I always expect the worst. Because it's just one of those things where I'm like, I really hope you don't act like a dick, but you probably will. So I have this weird thing with people where it's like, it's always good to have an air of, pessimism as well as an air of optimism. I'm generally more of an optimistic person now. But it's like, if you are down all the time, not talking about mental illness, I'm just saying if you are an individual who focuses purely on the negative all the time, you start to almost infect others with the negativity. And it starts to be a drain on people. Yeah, exactly. And it becomes a drain. And eventually, the way I'm kind of visualizing it in my mind is if you think about if you put a pinprick somewhere and you get a pin in like water, and you get the ripples that come out in a perfect circle. So all of England, I imagine being, say, the colour brown, and you put a little pinprick down and it makes a red dot and then a ripple. And basically the brown is sort of everyone's neutral state. You put these dots in of red and it comes out, and that's negativity, and slowly it will spread all over and then everything will be negative. But then when everything is negative, you then get much more positive. So you get the little droplets, and then they're blue droplets, and then there's, positivity comes out and things. And I feel like it's just this weird cycle, and it seems to be sped up, I think, over the last probably 10 years or so, it seems, where things just get worse and worse and worse and worse. And then you get these sort of beacons of light and hope, and these amazing moments that happen where you go, maybe life isn't that bad, and all these things, and things start to look up. And then one really shit thing happens, and then it kind of resets it. And I find that with people, like even when me as an individual, I try and be optimistic, but generally I hate people. I love persons, I hate people. You meet someone as an individual, one-on-one, never have a problem with them. You meet people in groups and they act like dicks, including myself, unfortunately. But it's like, when I go outside and meet people, I'm normally, I walk around Tesco or whatever. Obviously, recently, not as much, but like generally you go out and you go, oh, I haven't interacted with people in ages. And you go, maybe they're not that bad. I remember being quite pessimistic. Maybe everyone isn't really a dick, and you have a few interactions, everything's normal. And then one person just does something unfathomably dicky for no reason. Like, one thing that gets me and Megan is if someone doesn't hold the door. Like, if you're ages away or whatever. But when you're so close, it's no effort to hold the door. Or if you hold the door for someone else and they don't thank you, I don't need a parade, but literally going, that is an acknowledgement that I've held the door. All I want is you to acknowledge the fact that I've done something I didn't have to do. And that's it. And you go into the world in this sort of, no, everyone's a dick. And then someone is. And then you've got that bad taste in your mouth. And you just almost can't shake it for a long time.
Yeah, annoyingly so. You really wish you could, but you think, So
why can't people just not be dicks all the time?
Yeah.
And then I feel like that with all aspects, where I just kind of think with politics in a lot of sense, it seems like it's in this... I feel like we almost are consistently feeling like we're on a boat about to drop down a waterfall. But as we are turning on the boat, the Earth is turning almost at the same time. So we're in this perpetual motion of looking over the edge, thinking, "Oh God, we're fucked now. This is going to end the world." When really we're just on this weird little loop. I think that's kind of how I feel about it. Well, I hope things are going to get better all the time. I've been saying this for probably the last 10 years of my life. Things will start getting better, and then one aspect does, and then another 3 aspects get worse.
And unfortunately, we always focus on the bad, doesn't it? You just turn on the news at any point in the last 50 to 60 to 70 years, and it is rough. It's just bad news. We're only telling you about the bad stuff. Remember someone once having an idea, a friend having an idea of like, why don't we just make the good news channel? I think Russell Howard did it, and he used to do it on his he did that hour of like satirizing the news, and then he'd have 10 minutes at the end of a 5-minute segment of something good that someone's done. It's a bit of charity or a bit of this, or, a sport, a fun run or whatever it was. And you think, well, would it be that bad for the news to do that? Because if you'd watch that on his show for like 5 minutes at the end of this section, which is only on for like, I don't know, how many weeks of the year, and you think, that's kind of filled me with hope and happiness and joy. And it doesn't take a lot. It's just something doing something nice, someone doing something nice for somebody else. That's a good thing, and it's made me feel better and feel like I could do something, myself. But we don't. We'd rather not. It's maybe it's easier for somebody else to focus on the bad things because that's going to get us all watching. But wouldn't it be nice if we just had a good news channel? The good news channel. That's what you had to call it. Good news.
I mean, I would love that. I do find it is. It is. I find with positivity and things as well, with trusting people, I generally do trust people to do the right thing, but I think I only trust them for everyone to do the right thing in extreme circumstances. I was having this thought the other day, and I was talking to Megan about it, and I was thinking like, I was just trying to comprehend my own thought. Sometimes when a thought comes in your head, and you're just like, I vaguely know how I feel about this, but I kind of need to deconstruct it in my own brain and just kind of say it to translate it into real words so I even know what I actually think about my own thought. I was having one of those, and I was saying like, if an old woman fell over in the street and she was hurt, I would trust the general public to make sure she's okay. But if I drop a £1 coin while walking somewhere, I do not trust that someone is going to pick that up and give it back to me. Now, obviously, a £1 coin is relatively nothing in small doses, but it's almost edging from the top down and trying to work out where you lose trust in people. Because I just find when life or death is in play, children or old people, generally most people will help. I've seen multiple occasions see an old person fall over, and you get a crowd of people swarming them, make sure they're okay. That's fine. But then you also get like times where you just walk down the street and someone doesn't look where they're going, they walk straight into you and then call you a dick, and you're just like, did you have to do that? Like, could you? And it's these weird little things where it seems like in the microdoses, humans are complete assholes, but when in the big life-changing things, they're nice, and you just think, do we really have to have like life or death circumstances to people to be polite to each other? Is that really? Because that's the cynicism I see myself becoming when I become an old man. It's just that whole, no one's polite, manners cost nothing, and everyone's a dick, but everyone is a good person. That's not everyone, but you know what I mean?
Most people.
I think that's kind of the conclusion I'm coming to, really.
We're getting there eventually, kind of in a roundabout way. Hold on. I realise somehow during this whole thing we've sort of talked about politics and our views on the world, not really about the stage. So,
I mean, that's fine.
But I've enjoyed it.
It's more of an excuse. It's more of an excuse for you to come back and then have another one.
I've got a good segue back into what we were saying before.
Yeah, please go ahead. I'd say we're starting to get towards the end, so maybe another 10 minutes or so, and then we can wrap up. But no rush at all. Go ahead.
So what I was going to say is, you're sort of talking about how the levels in between people, being nice and or just, essentially just not caring, is it's almost, so it reminded me of this, I think there's an ancient Greek philosopher had this sort of paradox of say you see a man and he has no hair on his head. He's bald, right? You call him bald. So you see the same man and all of a sudden he has one hair on his head. Just one hair on his head, could be anywhere. It might be right on the top. It might be, down the back. You think, you'd still call him bald. It's only one hair. You can't even see it. 2 hairs. Yeah. Okay. He's still bald, isn't he? He's only got 2 hairs on his head. 20 hairs on his head. Well, they're all kind of dotted around the place, and he's still Still, he's a bald man. 50 hairs on his head. Well, we're starting to get to the point. I'd still probably call him bald because he's not really. They're not really in a, okay, 100 hairs on his head. No, he's not a bald man anymore. Okay, well, when did he stop being bald? Was it 99 hairs? No, 99. He's still got hair on his head if it was 99 hairs. 98 hairs. Okay, what was the exact hair where you stopped being a bald man and where he became a man with hair? Well, and it's like kind of like there's no way of telling really with when that human kindness is going to come into play or not come into play, and you think, oh well, that's generally all kind people will help the old lady who falls down. Some won't, and or some will film it. I think one thing that really is slightly irritating me at the moment, Mike, I think is now I'm not on TikTok, but I am on Instagram, and I think a lot of the stuff on TikTok kind of comes through. A lot of the popular stuff, at least, seems to filter through. And there's always these just wonderful, wonderful, fantastic people who have gone out of their way to find a homeless person, let's say, or someone very underprivileged, and they've gone out of their way to take them to get their hair cut and to get their buy them lots of clothes, and then they've given them a big wad of cash, and they've all just done it out of the goodness of their heart for their fans. And you think, you're the dick in this situation. Surely, like, I don't see that. I mean, yes, okay, they've done something nice for someone, but they're not doing it because they're trying to be nice, in my opinion. And I really think that is a problem, because there's not, I don't think there's any sort of sincere part of that person's actions, because they're not trying to make that person's day better. They're trying to get a few more followers on TikTok for being a good person. And I think it's a real strange issue that I don't really. I remember an assembly we had at school, and so I went to I was talking about like infant school, or at the age of like under 11 for sure, and it wasn't a Church of England or a Catholic school or anything, but the teacher did talk about focused on God a lot. There was always like an assembly with a prayer and a song. Our head teacher was called Mr. Lassam. His first name was Cliff, and it was always Cliff R. Lassam. And then we found out his middle name was Richard, so he was Cliff Richard Lassam. And it was always very entertaining. His real name was like Cliff Richard, basically. Cliff Richard Lassam, and who also loved God. Anyway, he told us did this assembly. I'm sure it is a story from the Bible of who's the person who's essentially given more. And it's like if you had a tip jar or a donations jar for charity, and is it kind of like there's sort of he played the parts, fantastic acting, I must say. He the guy walks along.
You.
Yeah, it was. I still remember it though. I must have been about like 7 or 8. Not long after the Bill Sykes incident, I must have got over it. But he came along. Who's the person who's given more? The man who walks across, big chest bravado, and he puts down a £50 note and look at me, everyone. There you go. That's £50 for charity from me. Or this elderly lady that comes past and kind of takes her last coin out of her purse because it's all she has, but she wants to give something to the children or whatever the charity is for. And the person, we all know that she's the person who's actually given more. It's actually meant more, and it's and it's that sort of this act of charity. Somehow charity through these TikTok stars and influencers isn't charity anymore. It's like becoming
performance.
Yeah, performance, self-worth, and it's about that. It's not about the charity in the slightest. And I think it's a really dangerous tool that's being used quite worryingly, because I don't know if it's necessarily going to inspire people or just make people want. Maybe it might work for the good in the end. Who knows?
It's one of those things. It's like almost faux positive karma. It's like almost. It's kind of like. because I've struggled with this before, because I've had debates with friends of mine when you hear about certain celebrities who've donated, when you have charity drives like Comic Relief and things like that, it is one of those weird. I have a weird thing about it, because I think cognitive dissonance is the thing where you have two completely conflicting ideas going at odds at each other at once, and there's that part of me which is like, same as you, like, you shouldn't do good things for bad reasons. You shouldn't give money to someone because you can film it and get more followers.
Yeah,
but is the net bad? Is your action net bad or net good? And this kind of goes into that, to a degree, of that conversation I had with Jack Thomas in my episode about Good and Evil a little while ago, where it's that weird thing of like, if you do something which, if you give some money to this, if you give £100 to a homeless gentleman and it saves him from a night that was going to be his last night, and then he manages to get his life on the track and go off on his way and make a perfect life for himself, that's cool. And if you do that and you record yourself doing it on TikTok or whatever and get an extra 10 followers, that act alone won't undo all the good that this guy has had from you giving him the £100. But at the same time, we shouldn't be in a society, and I think it's the long-term, short-term thing once again, which I think was a lot of the time why the left and the right argue so much in many aspects as well, is because half the population want everything now and half the population are willing to invest. And it's that weird thing where no one's willing to do half and half. So it's just this mess of money being wasted everywhere. And I think it's that thing where we need people to do nice things because it's the right thing to do, and not because you're going to win points either socially or... And this is, I'm not going to get into a giant God discussion because I love talking about religion, but it's that idea of like, are you really a good person if you are religious because you are doing the good thing? Well, not just religious blanket, but most of the Abrahamic religions have an idea of heaven, hell, purgatory, generally a reward system of if you're good, you get rewarded. So by that logic, nothing you ever do is a good thing because you're only ever being a nice person to get rewarded in the infinite life, which compare 100 maybe years to infinity. In theory, you should be able to walk through glass for 100 years, because the amount of bliss you'll get from the infinity of heaven...
It's incomprehensible, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's one of those ideas where, realistically, most religious people have some degree of doubt in their mind, because if they didn't, they would literally be saints. Now, I've met religious people who are some of the nicest people I've ever met in my entire life, and they are good people in their heart of hearts. And I'm not trying to take away their morality. I'm not saying they're not good people. But it is one of those interesting thought experiments where it's just like, how many good actions for the wrong reasons is going to cause actual damage long term? And in some ways, you can kind of think of vice versa is what you were speaking about earlier, which is like, if you do something that's bad, but you think it's for the good reason, how far are you going to keep doing bad things? And I think it's the same with the good thing. It's like, if you only do good things to make sure people can see you doing these good things, are you going to then be in a position where you can help someone, but you don't, because you don't get reward from it? And then that's where the danger lies, I think. Yeah. It's such a weird thing, because it's like one of the things, I don't want to ban people giving money to homeless and recording them doing it, but equally I don't want people to be doing it. You know what I mean? It's such
I think
a
there's
weird...
and there's I think there's a feeling quite a lot of the time that so many videos and things you see online, though, that they're not, half of them aren't genuine. And did that person is this the fourth person they've gone to that wasn't appreciative, or didn't change, that actually really was did they go to a few homeless people and they gave them some money and they said, oh, thanks for the money, oh, can I take you for a haircut? Fuck off, why do you want to take me a haircut? Like, get away from me. And then, oh, okay, well, we lost £100 on that one, but let's get another one for the video. And you think, well, okay, again, they've still given someone £100 for the money, £100 to a homeless person. That is still a good thing. They're not doing it for the right reasons, but I don't know. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're all completely genuine, and they're all coming from a good place. And I'm just a judgmental old cynic. But
I'm definitely a cynic.
But sadly, I just don't think I don't think that's the answer. I think, unfortunately, there's a bit of duplicity going on. Maybe.
I think that with this whole conversation, we'll start to wrap it up now and things, because we've been chatting for almost 2 hours and it's flown by. It's wonderful. I think that the kind of the theme of this conversation almost is broad strokes and nuanced details and the weirdness of being a person, of just like, if you magnify something enough, which is what me and Jack did in the conversation I had with him, which is just like you magnify it to a degree where you get to the state where it's almost like your brain can't handle it because we haven't got the bandwidth. I haven't got a brain the size of a planet to be able to do the mental calculations to actually work out how I feel about. Morality is pretty ambiguous anyway. It's all about perception anyway. So it's just like this whole conversation is kind of like broadly you could look at something, but if you actually zoom in on it, it can actually sometimes be the opposite to what it looks like from afar.
Yeah, I know. I think a really nice thing you sort of the way you have touched on it there, though, Mike, is that something that I said earlier is that when I went to drama school and we learned about how to be an actor and what it was to be an actor, it wasn't. Let's teach you how to act, and these are the skills. This is the tools. Do this, stand here, say it like this. It was, you already know how to do that. It's how to learn about who you are as a person and how what it takes to, become you and to find those parts, to question those bits of your life that maybe you didn't question. And actually, in a way, the whole conversation has really been not about where do you stand on a stage to get, the most attention or how do you do this or where do you do that? And what's it really? But actually it was more about, if anything, it's been more akin to the training of learning and accepting or at least trying to ask yourself, who are you or who am I? I am a human and human is enough. Am I enough? Yes, you are.
Just ask the right questions. That's it.
Exactly. So in a way, this has been exactly like my training.
There you go. That's what I aimed for. That's actually, this is all part of the plan. Your entire life has been mapped out by Tonya Todd. She's organised all of these people, and I'm just one of those stepping stones to get you on the path of determinism that
she's cackling over a crystal ball now, like the witch that she is.
Exactly. I mean, this has been such a fun chat, dude. And the good thing is, as I said before when we sort of started, I'd have 4 footnotes and we wouldn't even tackle half of them. And I'm right, which is great, which means that you have an excuse to come on the show again. Fantastic, and what we'll do is we'll start on stage production. We'll skip over the 10% we spoke about. We'll probably do another 10, 15%. And then we'll have some big theoretical discussion on metaphysical ideas such as, love and, good and evil, all that sort of tomfoolery. I've got just in the back of one of my many podcasting notebooks, I've just got about 12 bullet points of just one question, which I did when I did that one with Jack. I was just like, I just want to talk to someone about the concept of good and evil. And then we did such a massive deep dive. We probably could have spoken for another 2 hours because you can magnify so much. It almost blurs everything else. But it was delightful fun. You'll 100% have to come on again. So
definitely.
The floor is yours. If you want to give out any, we'll talk on email and you can send me links and etc. I'll include in the description. But are there how people can find your social media, any websites, anything to look out for, and final statements and whatnot?
Oh, good. Yeah. I am off on a Shakespearean theatre tour this summer, which we will talk about, I'm sure, next time, a bit more in detail, which is at Henry V. I am Henry V in this production, which is very exciting. And we are touring all over the UK, into Norway and Belgium and Holland as well. So we do go into Europe. But yeah, pretty much if you're anywhere in the UK, we'll most likely be coming to a place near you, except for Yorkshire, bizarrely. So I don't know why.
Screw you, Yorkshire.
Seems to be, I know, the biggest area, biggest county. But yeah, we're not, so it's, 4 counties put into one, almost like north, south, east, west, or central, whatever. Yeah, so unfortunately we're not coming to Yorkshire, but we're coming close. So yeah, that's the Festival Players, they're called. You can also, you can find me on YouTube if you look for Golden Age Theatre Company. There's a few monologues I've done on there, which involve one involving time travel, which is quite exciting, and one also involving, as I mentioned it before, about a man who falls in love with a person who he can't work out their gender and spends most of the monologue trying to figure out their gender, or then actually realising it maybe isn't as important as he first thought. I am on Instagram as well. TA Everatt is, which I'm sure will be wonderfully spelled out by Mike in the footnotes.
Yes.
And catch me on all of there. Otherwise, I don't really have any too many things to say. Just human is enough. We are human, and yeah, you are enough. That's all I have to say.
Wonderful. Human is enough. That's going to be the name of one part of the episode. There we go. Have a little footnote. Use that as a snippet or something. I don't know. But yeah, absolutely wonderful. We'll stop it there. So yeah, I'll include all the links in the description. It's been an absolute blast meeting you and chatting with you for 2+ hours, and we'll definitely do it again.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mike. Been an absolute pleasure, genuinely.
And that's the end of the podcast. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. As I said in the intro, any Patreon supporters get access to the full unsplit episodes that I do. So whenever you normal listeners get access to part 1 and then part 2 later, any supporters on Patreon, regardless of the tier that you support with, you get access to the feed, which has the full unsplit episodes on there, as well as 2 episodes of Afterthoughts each week, as well as other stuff as well. So if that sounds like something that interests you, go over to patreon.com/genuine Chit-Chat, and you can listen to our episodes of Season 1 of The Witcher and Star Wars The Phantom Menace completely for free, so make sure you go and check that out if you haven't already. So what have we got coming up then? So I've got a 2-parter recorded with the powerful Matthew B. Lloyd of the Classic Comics Show on Comics in Motion. That's when my Star Wars podcast airs. And we speak about classic comics. So from the golden age, like the 40s and 50s and 60s, we talk about that. And then we also talk about Star Wars and some of the really funny things of Star Wars back in the sort of late 70s. There's newspaper strips that have got Boba Fett skiing with Luke Skywalker, which is just hilarious. And lots of other funny things like that as well. So that's going to be part 1 next week. The patrons will probably get part 1 and part 2 in one go as one full unsplit episode, as I pretty much always do for these things. So make sure you become a patron before that drops, and then you'll get early access to part 2 of that as well. After that, I've got another podcast recorded that I did with Tom Everett once again, because there were some subjects that we didn't actually tackle in this 2-parter that we wanted to tackle. So before he goes on tour to go on his, I think it's Henry V that he's going with for several months, he's playing the lead of Henry V. We actually talk about it quite a lot in the podcast that we do. That probably isn't going to be released for a little while, on the basis that I've got a conversation to be recorded on Monday, which is tomorrow, with Goff of Beer Nuts Productions. He's a wonderful returning guest, one of my favourite people to talk to. It's only going to be a shorter chat of about an hour long with him, but he's recently launched a podcast, he's got a new comedy film out, there's lots of other things that he's been involved with, so we're going to talk about those things. I've got a conversation with a gentleman who is heavily involved with certain elements of Star Wars Return of the Jedi, which I'm incredibly excited about, so I'm very, very thrilled to be speaking with him. I've got another conversation due for recording later in that month as well with someone else that I can't go into details about that either at the moment. And then there's a few other bits and pieces in the pipeline, like I've got a conversation at the start of June with someone who's been podcasting for like 14 years, and there's loads of other things sort of in the pipeline, so make sure you check those out too. Regarding me and guest spots, if you're listening to this, then the episode I've done on The Bad Batch has been released. So my Star Wars podcast, I released an episode about Kanan Jarrus, also Caleb Dume, and also what we did on the Comics in Motion, we did weekly episodes of Mandalorian, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, WandaVision and whatnot, and what we're doing with The Bad Batch is slightly different. Myself, Megan and Dave have just recorded an episode about The Bad Batch. It's just over an hour long, and we speak about episode 1 and episode 2, some of the connections to the Clone Wars, to other things, and some of the contradictions within there as well to other content too. So if you are interested by those things, obviously there are going to be spoilers about The Bad Batch. Make sure you go over to Comics in Motion, and it should be released likely late on the 9th of May. So make sure you check that if you haven't listened to that already. And if you fancy, you can check out my Star Wars show, which releases new episodes on Saturdays on the feed of Comics in Motion. Also, if you go to the YouTube page of Genuine Chit-Chat, I upload the episodes on there as well. And it is basically just me talking about canon comics. So me talking about the narratives, the connections. You don't have to read a single comic to enjoy the show. You could have read every comic and still you'd find things to find interesting, because I go through the narrative, give vague plot details, read out a little bit of dialogue here and there, but talk about the connections, you know, when there's certain species that pop up or certain things that happen in comics, when it happens in the films, all these other things. It's just a good way to kind of tie in comics without you having to spend loads of money buying loads of Star Wars comics and things, because it can be very pricey and very time consuming, and some of the comics aren't phenomenal, so I read them all for you. So if you're interested by that, go check out Star Wars Comics in Canon either on Genuine Chit-Chat's YouTube or on the feed of Comics in Motion. In addition to those things, the last thing I'll mention is I was recently on Frank Burton's newest podcast called I Like the Sound. I've included a link to that in the description. I'm on there with a few other people in the podcasting realm that are all great people. So if you want to listen to that, make sure you go check that out. I've included a link in the description, and I will be having Frank Burton on the podcast likely later in May. So you'll probably see that podcast in June sort of time. So yeah, lots of things in the background, lots of things I can't talk about at the moment. But also I wanted to mention regarding Patreon is I've now reduced the amount that you have to pay to be a patron. So the lowest tier is now £1 a month. So if you're willing to throw me 25p a week for an extra around about an hour's worth of additional content, then, as well as early access and all sorts of other things, £1 a month is all it takes, which in American dollars I think is less than $1.50. So if you think it deserves it and you just want access to the feed, you can do that. For the next tier up, which I think is £2, you then get access to the feed, which has got previews of the Star Wars comics that I do, photos of stuff like my Funko Pops I do each Friday, as well as there's going to be more behind the scenes stuff. There's also on the feed, there's future guest lists. So I've just got a list of all the guests that have been confirmed that are going to come on the show, some of the guests that I'm trying to get, and all of the guests that I've got recorded episodes with and booked in, as well as guest spots and lots of other things. It's a really good place to go if you want to know everything that's happening with me. And then there are other tiers as well for more higher up things as well, like having a promo play in the show and all these sorts of other things. But yeah, check out patreon.com/genuine chit-chat because there is free stuff on there, so make sure you check that out. So from that, guys, that's really it from me. Make sure you go and tell Tom Everatt how much you loved our conversation. You can find him on Instagram at @TAEveratt. I've included a link to it in the description, or rather his Instagram tag is in the description, as well as the websites of the theatre companies and things that he's been involved with. And yeah, really, guys, that is enough from me. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I appreciate each and every one of you, especially listening all the way to the end. It means the world to me. And a massive shout out to Tonya Todd, who has become a recent Patreon supporter. She's an amazing person. We even spoke about her in part 1 of this very conversation, and she's a supporter of the show, and it means the absolute world to me. So thank you to Tonya, thank you to my other wonderful patrons, and thank you to you, listener, for listening to my entire show, especially up to the end. Anyway, guys, thanks as always for listening, and I'll talk to you guys next week.